Hey everybody, welcome to Space Week. I'm Kiki. I will be your pilot today. So Space Week is something that we've kind of invented, but not really. This Friday is National Space Day. But who take a day, make it a week, right? So we have extra special programming across our Twitch channel, our TikTok, our Instagram, basically anywhere that we can post content. We are posting space content all week. Thank you for joining us here. Check us out everywhere else. We have a ton of new people in the stream today. I'm going to say hi to Kobe Brian R, Superior Chris 17. What's up? Christine Lane, Dark Talon 07, Efren 712. Hey, what's up? Sub. Griffin D123, J Wall, Sophie 710. Oh my gosh, this is so exciting. You all are probably here to see our awesome guest today. Erin Winick is NASA's Science Communication Specialist for the International Space Station. She helps communicate the science of what's going on up there, all this kind of like science that's being going on for all of us down here on Earth, kind of in plain English. She's also in charge of the International Space Station's social media accounts. Check them out at ISS_research. And she writes for NASA's International Space Station science page, which we'll throw a link into the chat. It's just nasa.gov/ISS-science. Please welcome a round of applause for Erin Winick.
Hello, everyone. Excited to be here.
Well, you are not a stranger to our Twitch. You've in fact been here before.
I have.
So welcome back.
Yeah, thanks. Excited to be here to talk all things space this time.
Yeah. Super excited. Why don't we just dive right into some science newsy news. My stream deck is not working, so Elena might have to press the fun audio button, or I can just say science newsy news that'll impress your friends that you can't stop thinking about even if you wanted to. Ooh. Okay. This is a special section of our Monday stream where we talk about 3 cool science news stories. So today we're going to be talking about space stories. All right, Erin, first story I want to talk about is the SpaceX Crew 2 launched up to the International Space Station just like a couple weeks ago on Thursday, April 22nd, I think.
Yeah, it was originally supposed to launch on Earth Day. It ended up going the day afterwards, but it was a really cool launch. 4 new people headed up to the space station. Honestly, this past month has just been a flurry of activity for humans heading up to space and humans coming back from space. We had a Soyuz launch at the beginning. We had Kate Rubins and 2 cosmonauts, the 2 Sergeys, came back from the space station. And then Crew 2, we launched 4 new people up to the space station, which actually brought the number of people up there to 11. Which is not a record for the space station. The record's 13 from the space shuttle era, but it was a lot of people. We had some people camping out in different parts of the space station, lots of science going on. Yeah, we have on screen right there, we have Shannon Walker, Victor Glover, Mike Hop.
This is actually the crew that just returned.
Yes, exactly.
I think we do have a photo kind of we have a view of the Crew 2 coming to the space station. Yeah, super cool. And in addition to the people on board, which for that one were Megan MacArthur, Thomas Pesquet, an ESA astronaut. We had Hoshide from JAXA and Mr. Kimbrough from NASA. So we had 2 NASA astronauts. We had 1 ESA and 1 JAXA. So Japan, Europe, and 2 from America. So a really international crew, which was very cool. And in addition, they actually are going to be working on a ton of science while they're up there. They launched with a few science payloads on board as well. They're also going to be helping install some new payloads on the space station too over the coming months, some new solar arrays.
So you probably are familiar with the look of the space station, how it's been for a long time. We're actually going to have some rollout solar arrays that are going to go on top, kind of in between some of the solar arrays that are up there right now. And they're going to roll out kind of like a huge yoga mat and provide additional power up there, which can enable some of the new stuff that maybe we hadn't anticipated 20 years ago when we were designing the space station for these specifications, new power for more science. It's going to be pretty cool.
Whoa. So when they install those, is that done via spacewalk or is that done with machines?
A mix. So yeah, well, there's actually going to be some spacewalks in advance to also prep the areas. Some of the prep has already been done on some spacewalks earlier too. The first round, because there's 6 new panels, so it's actually going to launch in a number of different vehicles. The first are going to launch on SpaceX 22 coming up pretty soon. And then they're going to go over the course of the next year or so in different batches. So a lot of different astronauts are going to be able to help with it, including the Crew 2 astronauts that just headed up.
Awesome. Wait, you said Crew SpaceX 22? Is that for 2022?
No, so actually the commercial resupply missions are numbered based on like how many there have been. So this is going to be SpaceX's 22nd commercial resupply mission. So these are all the ones that just are focused on science and supplies rather than sending people up. And they've been sending up science and supplies for a while. They just started sending people, which is what's really exciting.
Okay, got it. So now let's talk about Crew 1 that just splashed down.
Yeah, literally just splashed down.
36 hours ago or so?
Yeah, so this is actually really cool because this is the first night splashdown since Apollo 8. So usually, we've had a lot of people coming back recently that were on shuttle, they landed on a runway. The Soyuzes land in the desert, like on land. And now we've been having splashdowns for some of the first time since the Apollo spacecraft. This is the first actual nighttime one. This is very cool. Yeah, here's a picture of the crew that landed. Again, I got to plug the science. We had some science coming back on board too, some science samples that came with the astronauts, so they helped bring that back. And they splashed down, and then they were back in Houston pretty fast. Houston is where they all get shuttled back to because all the astronauts live around Johnson Space Center where they train. So they got picked up out of the ocean, brought back to land, and shuttled back to Houston. And pretty cool. It was very, very awesome. And they were up there for about 6 months. It was a really cool mission. They conducted a lot of different science, ranging from plant research, which I know we'll talk about a little bit more later, to protein crystal growth experiments, which help with drug development and discovery. So many cool things. So having these astronauts that are going up and down a lot more frequently is hugely helpful to conducting more science. More people up there means more science and more opportunities to send science up and down, samples and stuff for researchers.
Cool. And then I know I was watching a bit of the live stream before I sadly just couldn't stay awake any longer and fell asleep, and then finished watching it the next day. But
it was a night splashdown, so
oh my gosh. I know Mike Hopkins, this was his 3rd time, I believe, visiting the space station. Victor Glover, I think, is the first black man that has been in space or at the space station for that extended amount of time.
Oh, yeah, first long duration black astronaut up there, because we've had some that have visited, but it's just really awesome to have him up there for the full mission. Yeah, and he was also a first-time flyer, so it was his first time in space going with the more experienced crew, and he talked a lot about it was really cool to go along with those people who had been up there before and kind of help him learn, and now he's going to be an experienced space flyer for the next time, doing the same thing for the people coming up with him.
Yeah, and then I think, correct me if I'm wrong, but at least some of these astronauts had been up there for the longest amount of time.
They're not the record holders, but they were up there for a substantial amount of time. One of the records that we did actually have was Soichi Noguchi. So the JAXA astronaut, he's one of the only people to fly that many vehicles. So he's flown on now Dragon, Soyuz, and Shuttle. So he's getting the full experience there, which is pretty cool.
Whoa. And we retired the shuttle program 10 years ago.
Yeah, it's been a long time. I was at the last shuttle launch when I lived in Florida. I grew up in Florida, and my mom and I drove over and got to see that last shuttle launch. And it's crazy. I was in high school at the time, and just to think that it's been that long, I I'm excited to be able to get back to Florida myself and see one of these launches. Will kind of bring things full circle for me.
Now, was the Endeavour one of those space shuttles?
The ones that was launching, yeah. I don't remember which was the last actual one to launch, but yeah, I've seen a number of those when I was living there, and it's pretty cool. Now they're naming some of the different Dragon capsules. Some of the names have been inspired by the shuttle names that people have flown on. This time we had Resilience, and we just had some pretty cool homage to the space shuttle era.
Yeah. And then if you happen to live in Southern California, this was like 5 years ago maybe, but the Endeavour like made a bunch of loops around Southern California before it ended up landing and going to our like Natural History Museum, I believe, here in
Cool.
Los Angeles.
Yeah, they have
but that was
special
crazy
planes
to
for
like
transporting those.
to like be in your office and you look out the window and there's like a space shuttle flying around. It was so cool.
Yeah, and there's still launches that happen out there too, just not space shuttle launches, but Vandenberg is pretty near in Southern California. So you don't just have to be in Florida to see shuttle launches. There's even up in Wallops in Virginia, West Virginia, there's opportunities to see launches up there. So you don't just have to be in Florida to be able to see those cool liftoffs.
Yeah, it was awesome. Okay, news story 3, which is kind of a few news stories. Let's talk about the science that happened on board the ISS during the week of April 26th. I know there were 3 cool things you wanted to talk about.
Yeah, so one of the things that happens when people first get to the space station or about to leave station is there's a lot of human research that's conducted in samples. Because one of the things that we like to do is be able to use these astronauts basically as test subjects, So there's samples that are taken before they leave to kind of generate a baseline. And then once they get up there, there's a lot of things that are ranging from, taking blood and urine samples to actually them participating in different scientific activities. So some of the ones I wanted to mention that their astronauts have been doing now that they just got there, where one of them is evection. So you can see here, one of the astronauts is wearing a VR headset. So this is to be able to take measurements and determine an astronaut's ability to visually interpret motion, orientation, and distance, how it may be disrupted by microgravity. So because you can think if someone didn't know exactly how to move or where they were positioned, that could be bad if you're trying to move around the space station or trying to pilot a spacecraft. So they're trying to see how much over the time that they're in space they get affected by this. So it makes sense. You want to get that baseline right when they get to space, see if they have any different types of interpretation of that motion, and then that data can feed that research, and especially help for longer duration missions down the road to be able to adapt different technologies in living spaces.
I honestly, there's so much going on in this picture that
I know, right?
like hard to digest.
Yeah, so I'll walk you through a couple of things. So if you see there's a laptop kind of next to the astronaut that's strapped in there, that's what they're seeing in their headset. So there's lots of different dots that are being used to kind of simulate movement in there. It kind of like goes past them, so it looks like they're going down a hallway to them. There's often a dot in the middle of the screen. So that's used to be able to simulate that motion and to see how the astronauts perceive it. And then you don't want to float into something while you're doing this experiment, so they get strapped into that big like X thing behind them. They kind of like buckle themselves in so they don't float away while they're doing this, but they still have the feeling of like floating in microgravity, not like they're like strapped into a seat.
Mm-hmm. Now, silly question.
Mm-hmm.
This astronaut is upside down. Does the astronaut feel upside down?
Good question.
There's no gravity.
No. Yeah, so on station, there's kind of a generally accepted orientation, but you'll see people working on the ceilings, working on the walls. There'll be a laptop over here, a microscope over here, so you'll see people working on their own surfaces. When first astronauts get there, they often their brain wants to make it feel like there's a right up and down. But after they work there for a while, they are more okay with adapting to that. There's no real ceiling or floor, but the table's here, so I'll put my legs under the table like I'd be at a normal kitchen table. And actually, if you see on the bottom, right below the astronaut's head, there's two blue bars there, which are used for the astronauts to hook their feet under it. So if they want to kind of like stay in one place while they're doing an activity, that's how they can stay there. And they also use them to kind of like propel themselves through the space station, because you don't want to be grabbing onto scientific experiments all the time. They have certain areas that are safe grab points like that.
But so he's not getting a rush of blood to the head. He's not.
No, yeah, it's funny when they first get there. Sometimes you'll see astronauts have a little bit of swollen faces. It's called, some people call it space face, but it's just because all the fluids in their body, including like blood, it doesn't all get pulled down into their body. Some of it kind of swells up a little bit. So astronauts actually do kind of feel a little bit stuffy and maybe just like a little bit like you have allergies type feeling. But you have that no matter what orientation you're in. And then after they're there for longer, they adapt. But that is something we've been studying called fluid shifts, and see if there's ways to mitigate that and what if it causes any issues. There's sometimes astronauts have experienced vision changes in space, not all of them, but even when they come back, sometimes it doesn't completely fix itself. So they're seeing if sometimes the fluid shifts are one of the things that could be an influencing factor. It's called SANS, space, like neuroocular disorder, something like that, that could cause those issues.
Bree Stu asked you, is it nauseating?
Depends on the person. Different astronauts have more motion sickness than others. Some even cite coming back to Earth is more nauseating, like that experience of gravity so fast. So it totally depends on the individual person. Some of them say, I didn't notice a thing. I was more comfortable in space than I've ever been on Earth. And some people do get that motion sickness when they get there. But again, all the things, your human bodies are pretty incredible. They adapt over time.
Okay, so the first study that we talked about, vection. Now there's another one. Grasp.
Yeah, there's two that kind of go as a pair. They're grip and grasp. So one thing I'll mention too, it's cool. It's obviously the International Space Station. So these are European Space Agency focused experiments. The last one was a Canadian Space Agency experiment, but you'll notice astronauts from all the different countries participate in them. So we need a lot of data points. Science requires a lot of data. There's only a certain number of people that are going up to the space station. So as many people as we can get to participate in these, it's really helpful to collect that information for scientists. So this one, you'll see that same sort of thing strapped in a VR headset. This one focuses on the central nervous system and looking at how things like sight and hearing and how our body like basically computes that and then turns it into motion. For example, like, does an astronaut perceive something where something actually is at the right time? Scientists have often noticed that astronauts tend to move a little bit slower in space, which sometimes can result in experiments or activities taking a little longer than they might have anticipated on the ground. So this is kind of helping provide data for that and just have a better understanding of how we interact with our space. And the third experiment that on the list too, GRIP, is in the same range. GRIP is similar, but it has a person sitting down rather than wearing a VR headset. And you have like a kind of a little block that you move up and down and manipulate mass to be able to see like your reactions to requests for different specific types of movement. And again, all providing that information on the human element and how we adapt to microgravity. And a number of those things can also be applied then back here on Earth to better understand like how gravity affects us, because we never really understand it until we remove it. And so some of these things can actually generate information that will help with treating diseases that might be interfering with these type of functions for humans here on Earth as well.
I think we might have a picture of GRIP as well. So, okay,
yeah,
there you go. So,
and that's astronaut Alexander Gerst working on that one.
Do you think the science behind these studies is going to be applied to, like Mars travel, or kind of like the science is going towards helping astronauts do even longer extended trips in space?
Definitely. I mean, one of the things that the space station is really good for is just to be a test bed, both, for microgravity research that'll benefit us here, but also to help us learn how we can really stay in space for long periods of time, adapting spacecraft to better how humans, interact with space and microgravity after they've been up there for a long time, because a trip to Mars is going to take a while. So by sending humans up to the space station for a year, 2 years, maybe even in the future, right now we've only done like year-long trips. from the NASA side. You might remember Scott Kelly, who participated in the twin study a few years back, was pretty famous for his 1-year mission. That type of data is really important because if we send someone to Mars and we've never sent a human to space for that long, how can we understand what problems we might encounter in the future or what changes might happen to the human body? So it's really, really important and just the stepping stone to all that future exploration.
Super exciting.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, I think that wraps up this week's Science Newsy News that'll impress your friends that you can't stop thinking about, even if you wanted to. Okay. For everyone watching that was like, what is going on? We usually have a sound effect for that. It just happens to be broken today. So, got me instead. Okay. Erin, I want to learn a little bit about you and how you found yourself in this amazing job. Because if anyone happened to watch our stream about a month ago or so, Erin joined us. She did an amazing lesson on modeling for 3D printing. And it was so cool. We had her on because she has a mechanical engineering background. But you do science communication for the International Space Station. How did that happen?
Yeah, well, the thing I like to say is it just goes to show that so many people can participate in science no matter what your background. Like the people I work with now are primarily, it's a mix of people with PhDs to journalism and communications backgrounds and videography expertise. So the way I came into it though was, when I went into college, I wasn't really super sure exactly what I wanted to major in. So I really liked both journalism and I really liked making stuff and like the whole sciencey side of things. So I figured it could always be easier to go back to writing about stuff than it could be to go back to getting that technical expertise. So I decided to go ahead and get my engineering degree, and I really enjoyed the aspects of, I interned at a number of places on the manufacturing floor and got to learn 3D printing and design, how to weld and use lathes and mills and all that stuff. But I found this niche that I really loved of communicating that stuff out, because there's a lot of engineers that aren't necessarily interested in that, and that's okay. But we need people that can help talk about science and engineering both to the public, and then a lot of companies want that just to be able to express what they do so people can appreciate and understand that. So I started freelancing when I was in college, writing for a number of small publications, and I even started my own 3D printing jewelry companies, which is some of what we talked about last time, and I really found my passion for communications and talking about these really awesome things that are being done that maybe not everyone knows about. And so I kind of had my gateway into this world by getting an internship at The Economist in London, writing for the science and technology section. I jumped over to MIT for a little under 2 years, writing about the future of work, manufacturing, and then transitioning into space, which allowed me to make the jump over to NASA. So it's kind of been an evolution, just always relying on that technical expertise to be able to really understand these complex things, and then also be able to understand how to talk to engineers. Sometimes there's jargon and stuff that you need to be able to translate. And so being able to come to NASA and do that for the space station is really incredible, because I get to learn constantly, because up on the space station there's experiments ranging from biological to these human and medical research to robotics to plant, agriculture, everything. So I obviously am not an expert in all of that, but I get to use that engineering expertise I've learned how to learn, and I've learned how to digest that technical information and then explain it to the world. And honestly, it's just a ton of fun. I love it.
Well, let's digest some more technical information for us Earthlings.
You got it.
Okay. There's 3 really cool, I guess, bigger experiments that are going on at the space station that we're going to cover today. And the first one, I had to do a double take when you were explaining it to me. And I still don't totally understand what it is, which is why I have you on. So we're going to talk about Astrobees.
Yes.
And
yeah,
these aren't we're not sending bees to space.
No, we're not. I don't know if we've done that one. We have sent some insects, but I don't think we've sent bees up there yet. Not positive, though.
So what's an Astrobee?
Yeah, so there are three Astrobees up there right now, and basically they're kind of like they're cubes. There are three different colors. There's Honey, Bumble, and Queen, and they're about 1 foot by 1 foot by 1 foot little robots that use kind of like fan electric propulsion inside of them to be able to move around the space station. And the main reason we have them up there is to be able to test out them being assistants to the astronauts because the astronauts' time is really precious. You know, they are booked constantly the whole time they're up there. And if we can have but that can move things around the space station or help with just kind of smaller tasks, it's a really beneficial thing to be able to free up that time from the astronauts. They don't have to go digging through all of the cargo. So these were developed primarily by NASA's Ames Research Center, because a lot of the different NASA centers will develop different things that then get sent up to the space station. And the idea is that they can be tested on station, verified to be autonomously functional robots, as well as being controlled from the ground. They have little cameras inside of them that help them navigate to be able to perform these tasks. And after they're like verified to be functional and work, they're then going to be used as a facility for conducting other experiments. So on the space station, we refer to the different places where experiments are conducted as facilities. So we might have a glove box that you put your hands in, and that's a facility, the life sciences glove box. Astrobees are going to be a facility for testing out different things that they might be able to do or different experiments that would benefit from kind of riding around on these cute little guys. They also have little blinking eyes on the front of them, which make them pretty adorable. And a lot of the astronauts really like them and will take really cute pictures. And so they'll fly around. Sometimes they have a little grabbing arm that they can like grab onto bars, just like I was talking about with the astronauts earlier, grabbing onto those bars. They can do the same thing and kind of like perch on different places. And so we've been testing it for a while, and they kind of like are sitting up on their charging dock on the wall in the Japanese experiment module now. And a number of experiments are done, and they've been, like I said, kind of verified, and now they're moving on kind of into the next stage of being used for experiments. So they're pretty cool. I'm a big fan, and I'm excited to see kind of where they go.
So these, we're watching a video now that is of, them testing the Astrobees.
Yeah.
They are in fact up at the space station right now, correct?
Correct. Yeah, they've been there for a little while now. I want to say around 2 years-ish.
Okay.
And they're actually based on a different experiment. So there are these robots, again, robots. They don't look exactly the same, but we're called spheres. They're kind of like, I don't know, hexagonal more looking. And they were used for a lot of student experiments to be able to allow students to control robots from the ground around the same size. And so these Astrobees kind of build on that legacy of research and that information that was obtained. And these are just a little bit more advanced. And as we talked about before, these could be great to be able to, after we verify them, send on a mission to Mars. What could be better than having that assistant to help you with those tasks on that long journey? So it's really a testing opportunity, again, on the space station to verify these for the exploration of the future.
I'm not gonna lie, this seems very like Star Wars-esque.
Yeah,
Of like having this
totally.
little droid help you out with all of your little tasks. Not little, with your
Yeah,
big tasks.
yeah, and
Okay.
it's totally super helpful.
Slurpy Burpy asks, what sound are they recording?
Their focus isn't on sound. I actually don't know if they have microphones on that. In this testing setup, they wanted to make sure that it didn't produce too much ambient set noise because the space station is already kind of a loud place to be. So you want to make sure it's not going to contribute, if the robot's flying by your sleeping quarters, it's not going to be too loud or contribute too much to that environment. There's actually been a number of experiments that have been done on measuring the impacts of just living in like a place where you constantly have that ambient noise on your hearing. So anywhere you can, they want to minimize that and make sure that those electric fans in there aren't going to be too loud. But then once it's on station, I don't think they actually have sound recording on them. I think they just have cameras.
Got it. Okay. So those were the Astrobees. The next
Hmm.
experiment I want to talk about is the plants.
Of
So,
course.
um, there's quite a bit of growing, like agriculture almost happening on the space station. Can you
Yeah.
tell me a little bit about how they grow, what they're growing? I know we have some photos to throw up too to show like the cool things that are going on.
Yeah, we've been growing stuff for a while up there, and it just continues to get more advanced, and we try to increase our understanding of how plants grow in space. So we have grown a lot. The majority of what we have grown is leafy greens. So that's things like red romaine lettuce or wasabi or pak choi, like that sort of stuff. But we've grown a number of things too. We've grown everything from zinnia flowers to radishes. And we're testing a large variety of crops just to see what grows best in space. And then also, astronauts will actually do taste tests and see what tastes best and, like, see what they might prefer on these missions. Then generally, you're trying to grow things that are more nutritious, often that have pretty quick turnaround growth times, because you don't want something that's going to take a really long time to grow. So it's easy to harvest, pretty hardy, and we often grow things in the veggie facility, which is what you see here, that pink light coming down. And we've tested different types of lighting, different colors of lighting, different ways to water plants. Because if you think about it, you can't just take a watering can and pour some water on your plants. And if the water in space, might have often seen, it'll kind of like glom around stuff and kind of like stick. And if you do that on roots, you're going to drown them. So they've had to develop new ways to be able to water these plants. Sometimes it's done with plant pillows. So these veggie seeds will be put in pillows that kind of will disperse the water over the roots. And astronauts will come up with actual syringes, and you can put it into these plant pillows and help water it. And here you can see in this picture, Jessica Meir is harvesting some of the Mizuna lettuce that they grew during their mission. And cut, and they had some great space salad, which she still talks about in a lot of her interviews. She really enjoyed having those fresh veggies up there, which that's one thing too. It's not just a positive thing for getting nutrition, it's also great because it helps astronauts have a fun thing to take care of and increase morale. Having that living thing on station with you, it really does have some positive benefits.
Mm-hmm. I can't imagine how good that must taste after eating. Actually, I'm not sure. What do the astronauts eat on a day-to-day basis?
Yeah, it's a mix. It's a lot of things that are rehydrated with hot water, but they actually say it's not bad. It's, there's often like a bad rap given for space food, but they've done a pretty good job with making it better now. And there's a lot of opportunity for astronauts between different countries to trade food and try each other's foods and have that like cultural sharing experience up there as well, which is pretty cool. But then when there are those resupply missions that I mentioned earlier that bring up a ton of new supplies, oftentimes there's treats and stuff that are on board. Sometimes actual ice cream is sent up. There's space ice cream that's often sold in these gift shops, and that's actually not eaten by the astronauts. They get to eat real ice cream, just put in the freezer. And they also will sometimes get fresh fruits and veggies that are sent from the ground. JAXA, Japanese Space Agency, on their HTV resupply vehicles will often send up really awesome fresh fruits and veggies from Japan and farmers from around Japan to the astronauts up there too. So when you're close to Earth, you can still get that veggie on occasion and that fruit, but when you're further away, you're going to need to grow it to be able to get that same experience.
We have a couple questions about this vegetable situation. First,
Sure.
Slippery Burpee asks, has anyone on Earth been able to eat the space vegetables?
So the ones that get sent down are reserved for scientists. I can't verify for sure if none of the scientists have ever eaten the stuff that was grown up there, but it's very small quantities of stuff that's able to be sampled, and so the astronauts usually get to have the extra given to them to be able to eat, kind of as a reward for growing this. Originally, they actually weren't able to. They had to send it all back, which was, I'm sure, sad on their part. But now we've gotten to the point where it's been verified that that's safe. So I don't know if anyone's eaten that. There have been a number of projects that send seeds up to space that are then sent back down and grown here. There's the Tomato Sphere project. I honestly think it sent millions of seeds at this point to, and students around Canada and the US can grow these seeds and do experiments and compare how seeds that were exposed to space versus seeds on the ground grow. So in a way, you can say that's like a space plant, but it's not exactly the same.
So, and then Sophie710 asks, do any vegetables grow better in space than on Earth?
Good question. So right now we're trying to figure out how to grow them best. So I wouldn't say it's a direct comparison. I don't know if maybe down the line we'll find a way to grow them better. One thing that was found recently, though, that was really surprising to scientists was Mike Hopkins, who just came down on Crew One. He was kind of the resident space farmer for the last expedition. He grew up on a farm and had a lot of experience with that and really wanted to kind of take ownership of that in space. So he performed the first plant transplant in veggie, and this was taking a little tiny little sapling and moving it to a different plant pillow in an area where it was growing. And researchers were like, oh, it's probably not going to work. That's even hard to do on Earth. And it did amazing and it thrived. They were like, so now there's probably going to be additional tests to see, is that a consistent thing or is that just luck, or can plant transplants work better in space? So that's really new. We don't actually know the full answer and explanation for that, but Mike Hopkins did an awesome job with that, and he did some really cool research up there.
I just like, I can't get over how sweet and rewarding eating something that maybe isn't like a mustard green, that
Yeah.
here it'd be like, eh, but up there it'd be like, this is the best day ever. Being able to
Yeah,
crunch
and
into something.
a lot of the astronauts, when they come back, everyone assumes that they'll want like a burger for their first meal or something, but a lot of them go to that fresh salad again just to get that fresh veggie. So it's a
Yeah.
lot of astronauts' first meal once they come back too.
And I take it that the experiments that are being done with plants on the space station is somewhat in preparation for our our journey to Mars.
Yeah, absolutely. And
Right.
for potentially the moon even too, because we hopefully will have something called the lunar gateway that'll be in orbit around the moon too, and to provide plant growth there too. Absolutely. And because just to be able to learn how those things grow best, when you're out far away from Earth, it's really going to be able to provide a lot of nutrients and as well as that rewarding experience, because we won't be able to bring everything from Earth. We're going to have some type of self-sustaining food production.
I want to back it up for a second. You mentioned
Mhm.
having another station orbiting the moon.
Yeah, so the Gateway is a spacecraft that's in work right now by NASA to try to develop, and with international partners, something similar but smaller that would be almost a port that would allow us to go between the lunar surface and up to lunar orbit. And this is something you might have heard about, the Artemis program, which with the goal of landing the first person of color now and the first woman on the moon by 2024. That's part of that program, to be able to provide that sustainable way to explore the moon consistently. And that's a really key piece of that, because you probably remember from the Apollo missions, there'd often be someone who was stuck in orbit around that they would then go rejoin. And this is kind of the new age solution to that. So a lot of really cool stuff honestly happening at Johnson Space Center, where I work too, on the development of that, and excited to see what those engineers come up with.
Yeah. Did you see that well, of course you know this, but the astronaut that was on the Apollo mission, or the mission to the moon, just passed away?
Yes, yeah, that was really sad. And NASA had a good tribute video that they put out for Mike Collins. I got the chance to actually see him speak when I was still at Johnson Space Center. And honestly, really hilarious, really amazing guy that had just such a really cool perspective on his piece of that mission. Because a lot of people would always ask him, were you the loneliest person in the world, being up there all on your own? And he was like, no, I was a part of this amazing mission and didn't have that feeling of loneliness that everyone anticipates he might have, just kind of orbiting up there by himself. A very cool guy.
Right. Well, and when there was, I think it was like every 7 minutes he lost communication
Mhm.
with Houston, and so he was truly, truly alone. Like, and for like every time he passed by like a certain like dark spot.
Yeah,
Um, Gosh, crazy. Well,
totally. Very an adventurous spirit to
very
be able to
sad.
do that. Hmm.
Yeah. Okay. Last experiment.
Hmm.
Fire.
Yep.
Fire on the International Space Station sounds like an action like Michael Bay movie. Like, I don't, it doesn't seem
Yeah.
like we should be lighting flames up there. But tell me why we're doing it.
That's what everyone thinks, but thankfully we're doing it very safely. I promise. There's no danger there. As I said the word before, we've constructed facilities that make it a safe thing to be able to do, and there's no concerns there. There's a few different ways that we do it. The first one that I'll mention, though, is the one we do the majority of the flame research in now, which is the combustion integrated rack, which is kind of this like almost a vault-looking thing with like tubes and gas containers and things, where we can light very small flames and do some pretty cool experiments. So the reason we do combustion research in space is because without gravity, flames burn differently. They actually burn as spheres. So that typical, candle flame shape that you're used to just doesn't exist in space. And that's because of convection on Earth doesn't exist in the same way in orbit. So that's a picture of the combustion integrated rack right there, and Christina Cook working on it. The astronauts don't actually have to run these experiments, but they do have to help maintain the systems. And so in orbit, there's no gravity to pull that, cooler, heavy air back down and make that warm air rise. So instead, it just kind of blossoms out into a spherical shape. So without this force of gravity on these flames, we're able to study the base elements of combustion in a much better way. So combustion scientists have always had to work with this variable that's just a given as a part of their research, but to really understand the basics of fire and flame, the basics of these engines that we create, and so many things as part of society for energy generation, on orbit, we can just learn the basics of this, which can then be applied. It's added a ton to the field of combustion research, including we actually found something that was a complete surprise. You might have heard of cool flames before, which they're not cold, but they're cooler than a typical flame. And there was one research experiment that was known as Flex that was testing a specific setup of combustion research. And after the flame had extinguished, there appeared to be something still burning. So this was a phenomenon that had been heard of before. It wasn't completely new, but we were able to learn about this because that was able to actually occur in microgravity. And there's been a lot of follow-up research on that now to be able to learn about these cool flames, because it's a different type of burning flame, which could potentially provide a cleaner type of burn for combustion research.
Oh, cool. You know what? I think we have video also. No, let's show that
Yes,
video.
totally.
It talks about like cleaner burning flames.
Yeah,
Okay.
this is a video of the flame design experiment.
Yeah. Sophie 710 said it's amazing that we're still studying something like fire, which we've already discovered thousands of years ago.
It's pretty incredible. And
Yeah.
one thing I'll add too is that one of the things that's really important is kind of studying things for fire safety purposes in space. Because if flames burn so differently, we need to do these small scale tests to better fireproof vehicles. One of the things that's actually done not on station, but again, going back to this commercial resupply missions, Northrop Grumman has a vehicle called Cygnus that when it departs station, they often conduct some of these experiments that are known as the Sapphire series of experiments. And these are some larger scale flame experiments that can be conducted because it's a vehicle that's way far away from station at that point. It's going to burn up in the atmosphere anyway, and they can film and get data from these larger scale experiments to test materials and conditions that might create different types of burn conditions in space. And then they can use that information to create better fire safety, like equivalent of codes for spacecraft and design constraints to better keep astronauts in space safe in case there is a fire at some point, again, on some of those long duration missions. And sometimes those studies can, again, help us back on Earth. There's something called confined combustion that Crew 1 did some work on, which was studying flames burning in small confined spaces. Because one of the things that firefighters can struggle with is if they have a small hallway, flame and heat can be funneled in a really fast and different ways than might be expected. And by studying that in orbit, we can study that same phenomenon for those spacecraft. But again, that is information that is helping inform designs and things back here on Earth again, which is pretty cool. There's some interesting video of that too, if you look it up.
Ooh, okay, we got the video going. Okay.
Yes. So
Okay,
this
there you
is,
go.
you see the flame.
It's a sphere.
Yeah, you see the flame got lit, And then also, I believe this is not at like full speed, but it is slower. The burn you might expect, like to see that typical like waving flame, would be slower. And here, those little particles there, those are soot that is actually coming off of it. And it's really important, as you can see on the video there, to study that, because soot is a pollutant. And if we can figure out ways to burn flames that would cause less soot, or just learn what causes more soot, that can help us with making those more efficient engines and burners and things here on orbit. And honestly, it's just gorgeous. I always love seeing these videos when they come down. It almost looks just like a firework or a dandelion, that's lit up.
Absolutely. Okay. So this is so cool. Awesome. Thank you for all this information, Erin. I can tell that you really love and really enjoy your job.
Totally. Like I said, it's the fact that I get to learn about all these science things. I'm not an expert in every area of science, but to be able to be a part of learning about everything that's happening on this laboratory is pretty incredible. And not every laboratory gets to study every area of science, and this one does. It's pretty amazing.
So now I want to open up the floor. So, how do the astronauts maintain their hygiene aboard? Like, how do they shower? How do they wash their hair? Because you said
Yeah.
the water just like in like marbles almost.
Yeah, and first I'll give a plug. I am a subscriber to the channel, so everyone should go subscribe. It's fantastic. So, yeah, Twitch
Erin
Prime right here.
totally is a subscriber.
So yes, but to your question, so for hygiene, first I'll say one of the most common questions gets asked is, how do they do their laundry in orbit? And the quick answer is they don't. They wear it until it's dirty, and then it gets burnt up in the atmosphere and thrown out. So they wear it for a pretty long period of time. The workout clothes not as long, because obviously you get really sweaty. You have to work out a lot in space, like more than 2 hours a day to be able to maintain your bone and muscle health. So those clothes get thrown away pretty fast, but everything else, they wear, the pants and shirts, everything for a pretty long period of time. And when they're done, when they're dirty, they go in the garbage. There's some talk about creating some potential way to wash them in space, but we're not there yet. And then for your hair, a lot of women with long hair, again, I highly recommend looking up, I think it's Nyberg. She did a video where her hair is like up like this, and she's like just pushing water through her hair like shampoo to be able to get it all wet, and then adding the shampoo and kind of washing it like that. So it's a very different, it's almost like you apply the water rather than, dumping water on. For brushing teeth, pretty normal procedure, but you can have the toothpaste floating next to you. And for showers, there's a lot of more like wiping down than an actual physical shower. But again, one of the things astronauts look forward to when they come home is having that traditional shower again. So it's, it's making the best of what you got, and it seems to work out pretty well.
Right. Are we polluting space by throwing stuff into the atmosphere like dirty clothes?
Well, thankfully, they're all aboard those resupply vehicles. Not all of the resupply vehicles that come up are able to actually return through the atmosphere. So just like those vehicles that had that fire research on board, those Northrop Grumman ones, those will burn up in the atmosphere. So they'll have a lot of trash on board, like those clothes, so that we don't have to worry about polluting the atmosphere or polluting space. It's just burnt up and gone. Just the equivalent of how like if an asteroid's going in to the atmosphere, it would burn up. It's the same type of thing. If we were doing that like a million times a day, probably wouldn't be great, but we don't have that frequency. Right now it's like a few vehicles a year that do that.
Right. Efren 712 asks, is the shampoo like a dry shampoo?
I don't know the specific type of shampoo that it is, to be honest. I think since we're using water, it's probably not a straight dry shampoo.
Right.
We don't have a lot of aerosols on the space station. So if there was like a dry shampoo, it could be like that same one that you are pretty used to applying on Earth. I'd imagine they probably have some other in-between methods, but the one that you typically see those videos, it does have water involved with it. So it's not a pure dry shampoo.
On the subject of water, water seems like it would be a finite resource. Is the water on board recycled? How do
Yes,
they get
very much
new
so.
fresh water?
Yeah, it's very much recycled. So, one of the things that we have on station that we've continued to improve is our water recycling system, our water recovery system. And the full system, known as ECLIS, is kind of the full life support system, and there's a water element of that. I believe we're at 93% recycling right now. But the goal, there was actually a recent improvement that was actually launched for specific elements of it. There's a brine processor, which is basically the urine processor, what they're trying to bring up the efficiency of. Because on long-term exploration missions, again, we need to bring that recyclable percentage. I believe it's up to around 98 something percent that we can fully reuse it. Because right now we can send up a resupply of water if we needed to, and we do on occasion. But the majority of it does come from that recyclability. And yes, we're recycling almost everything we can, even like some of the sweat that comes off the astronauts. They have it in rags. You can't just squeeze that out off into nothing. So we're trying to reclaim that as much as possible. And then there's a water dispenser you can get to be able to drink stuff from. And yeah, I think the slogan is yesterday's coffee becomes today's coffee.
Oh, funny.
Yeah.
They've got jokes.
They do.
Lex Lund says Erin Winick is a queen. Yes, she is. And she
Thank
also
you.
says she wants the sub, but she hasn't asked a question. So, Lex Lund,
Gonna drop it down there.
hit us with a question. Okay, so when you joined Today, I learned, which is our Thursday stream, like a month or so ago,
Mm-hmm.
we were 3D printing. I've heard that there's some 3D printing going on aboard the space station. What kind of stuff are they making? And
Yeah,
like, is it any different from printing on Earth as far as like the gravity situation?
yeah. So we've launched a few different types of printers at this point. The first time it was pretty much similar to what you expect from a plastic printer here on Earth. And the idea was that with that is that you could print something like a wrench, a tool that you might need on station but not have at the time. You could, instead of having to launch it, wait for a whole other resupply mission, you could instead print it and just use the plastic filament that you had there. So yeah, that was launched a number of years ago now. And since then, we've actually launched a few different facilities that are focused on recycling plastic to be able to then be 3D printed into something new. So that means you printed the thing, you used it, all done with it, don't need it anymore. You can recycle it and then turn that into the next thing that you need. And that also means you don't have to take up a ton of space with all these different tools. You can on demand print it when you want it. And that has been used a few times up there now. We're still in, that testing phase, so it's not something that's used constantly, but it is very similar to on Earth, and some of those initial tests were to make sure that it would be similar to on Earth. But I have to say, one of my things that I'm most interested in with it is also 3D printing human organs. And this is something that is very, very early, but has been testing the 3D printing of tissues, because one of the things with organ transplants is there's a huge donor list, but it's really hard to make them on Earth, because when you're trying to make it, you need a scaffold or a structure to be able to support these different tissues and cells. Well, in microgravity, there's no gravity pulling it down. So there's a lot of research being done to be able to potentially create human organs in space that could then be brought back to Earth. And like I said, very early stage, but the BFF facility that was up there like a year or so ago did successfully print some tissue up there, and the hope is to continue to advance that and see what we might be able to make further down the road.
That is crazy.
Yeah, absolutely,
Wow.
absolutely crazy. But it's one of those things that there really could be a huge Earth benefit that if we're able to do that. And that's one of the. There's a lot of research into finding the things that we can make in space and make it financially reasonable to do that. And human organs is one. Another one is actually fiber optic cables, because fiber optic cables, if you can refine refine their structure, they can make speeds faster, and people will pay more for faster fiber optic speeds. And so they've been working on developing those cables in space and testing those out. It's a process in a product called ZBLAN, ZBLAN.
Cool. Okay. Here's I don't know if you're going to know this one. Does space actually smell like burnt steak or does it smell like something else?
Sadly, can't say this from personal experience, but a lot of the astronauts have reported different things. I think that originally came about when there was some specific like metals. Sometimes people said it smells like almost like a gun smoke sort of smell. Um, I think that I have heard people say that it's not what space directly smells like, but it's sometimes what the cause in like an airlock. You might smell that in that atmosphere. What's like the exposure to the space, like harsh space environment, can cause on some like metals and things like that. I have to go look to double check. I know I think it was some place actually released a perfume or cologne that was supposed to smell like that at one point too, and sent it to a ton of like people on Instagram to try out. Sadly, I didn't get one of those, but that apparently is what space smells like, whatever is on that cologne.
I'll try to track it down for you.
Perfect, thank you.
Use my connections. Sophie710 asks, what is water most used for on the ISS? Is it primarily for human consumption?
Yeah, the way that it's used in a way that needs to be recycled, yes. It's also used for research for a lot of the cooling systems. We have a lot of really cold freezers that cold water has to be run through, and there's a lot of different pipelines inside station. I took this Payload Academy course a few months back, and there's like this crazy intricate system for the vacuum systems and the thermal controls and everything inside station. And that water does have to sometimes is used to bring out filter out different things, but it's oftentimes used for cooling. We have some really cold freezers known as Melfi, which is like the minus 80 degree freezer, and it's sometimes you'll see pictures of it being pulled out, and it's just like this beautiful like smoke and steam that kind of comes out of it. And so there's some really beautiful pictures from that really really cold freezer.
Okay, I have one more question for you, and then I want to make sure you answer anyone else's questions before we wrap this up. Okay, my last question is kind of like bringing it back to the beginning of the International Space Station.
Mm-hmm.
When was it built, and was it sent up to space in one piece, or was it assembled once like various pieces were brought up? And I think actually I would love to pull up a photo. I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. Did not mean to interrupt you.
Go for it. No, you're fine.
I was going to say, I think we have kind of like a big picture of the space station to load up at some point, just to kind of like give like a visualization of what it looks like.
I have my
and you have
my Lego space station behind. There you go. Ta-da!
Oh my gosh.
So yeah, the Lego set was for the 20th anniversary of the space station, so that'll give you a clue on the time. So over the course of the 90s, it was primarily built by a lot of payloads that were brought up in the cargo bays of the space shuttle, which was a really big area that stuff could be robotically removed and taken out and assembled. So it was over a number of missions, because the space station is around the size of a football field, which is pretty big. And the living space itself is around the size of a 5-bedroom house. So it was built a piece at a time, or a few pieces at a time. And but the actual first continuous human habitation started in November of 2000. So since November of 2000, there has been a human living in space. So that means if you were born after that, there's been a human in space your entire life. And so we just celebrated the 20th anniversary of that continuous human presence last year. And we're keeping it going. There's no plans to stop anytime right now. And it's been a pretty incredible thing to see it be constructed, because although it's done, there's still lots of stuff that gets added all the time, ranging from those new facilities inside to we actually just had an airlock that was added pretty recently during Crew One's time up there, known as the Bishop Airlock. A company called Nanorax sent it up there, and they're planning on deploying CubeSats, tiny little satellites that can go out from there into space. We've deployed over 250 from other areas of the space station already, but it's a dedicated place for that, other scientific experiments, things to go outside, external payloads, all of that. So we're continuing to work on it, even though it's been up there for more than 2 decades now. And we built it, even before that. we're still innovating, still making new uses of it. And yeah, it's pretty incredible.
Sophie710 asks, so will there be more solar panels on the ISS, or will the existing ones be improved?
It's
I think we
kind of a
touched
mix
on
of
this
the
a little
two.
bit.
So yeah, so I'll use my model over here. So the new solar panels are going to kind of go right here, kind of like in between and like partially cover up the other solar panels. So the other ones will still generate some energy, but these ones, which are more efficient and improved, will kind of roll out partially on top of them. So it'll add additional capability while we still keep those other ones up there and use some of what they're producing, even if we're kind of like shading some of it.
And then Efren712, our friend, asks, where can I get that Lego set? It looks awesome.
Yeah, I think I got mine from the Lego store directly. I don't know where they sell them in addition to that. It was actually it was a gift. I asked for it, and everyone, of course, well, what gift are you going to get me? You're going to get me the Lego space station. Like I don't think that was a hard one. So
Right. Yeah. I think everyone at NASA probably has asked or bought the ISS Lego set.
yeah, lots of desks have those decor on it now. So that, and they actually just announced a new space shuttle set too. So I think there'll be a lot of those coming in too.
Definitely. And next time we talk to you, maybe you'll have that to show us as well.
Yeah, of course, a new background.
Oh my gosh, Erin, we still have a couple more questions. Do you have a few more minutes to answer?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, cool. Christine Lane is asking how long will it last out there before things need to be replaced? Sorry.
They're all a little different. So, space is not a kind environment, and it's harsh radiation and lots of different things have to be dealt with out there. One thing that's pretty cool, there's something called MISSE, MISSE, which is a materials research platform. So they send out lots of different little pieces of whether it's paint or materials, it could be a 3D printed material, to see how it will stand up to the spaceflight environment. So that you don't have to take a risk. You can find out, will this material that I'm using to build this thing in space last? So we're still doing research on that. A lot of the different pieces on the outside of the space station do have to be replaced every once in a while, and things have to be maintained. That's a reason for some spacewalks that we do is for maintenance. A lot of the work that the astronauts do is maintenance as well, in addition to science. Well, the point of the space station is to be an orbiting laboratory, 250 miles, and provide a lot of resources. A lot of time does have to be spent maintaining it too. One of the scientific experiments, the alpha magnetic spectrometer, about a year ago, there was a set of spacewalks that Drew Morgan and Luca Parmitano astronauts did because it had some pumps that were failing in it. And this is a really, really important experiment that's actually helping us study dark matter and helping unravel some different astrophysics mysteries. And we wanted to keep this going, to continue to collect cosmic particles with it that could help us learn about space. So they did a series of pretty complex spacewalks to help maintain it, because it had only been originally designed to last a few years, and it hadn't been designed to be fixed, but it was providing such value that they decided to go ahead and design those complex spacewalks to be able to maintain it. So things might not have to be directly replace the whole thing, but certain pieces of it can be, and we can keep it going for longer.
Christine Lane, that was a great question. Thanks for sending that in. Oh, so awesome. Thank you for taking the time on this crazy, busy space month. I know there's so much going on between all the launches and whatnot, and you took an hour of your time to kind of explain everything that's going on with us, and I just want to thank you so much. You're so cool, and I hope this is not the last time that we see each other. I hope you can come back again sometime.
And maybe I'll be in the chat for some of your other live streams coming later this week. I'm looking forward to some of those.
We have some super cool, all our streams this week are so much fun. Thank you to everyone watching. Thank you, Erin. So much fun.
Great to be here.
We can find you on Instagram, TikTok, and Twitter at Erin Winick.
You got it.
The same across all platforms. How'd you get that?
Yeah.
Amazing. That's so easy.
Yeah. When you jump on platforms early, man, what are the benefits you get?
And Erin is a great follow because you essentially do your own science communication for space on these platforms. So you're
Yeah.
talking International Space Station and more.
Correct. Yeah. Although my main job is space station stuff, which you should go follow the ISS Research Twitter account too. Ooh, got to plug that. But
Yes.
in my free time, I do more science communication. Just because I love it so much. And if you go on TikTok, send me a Q&A question on there. I love to answer people's questions. If there's something I didn't get to talk about here or something you think about after the fact, happy to answer it on any of those platforms too.
Totally. Especially for National Space Day, aka National Space Week. Definitely go to Erin, follow Erin, and send her any space questions that you have. I'll send you a space question.
Thanks.
All right. All right. Goodbye, Erin. See you later.
Bye. Great talking to you.
Wait, you don't follow CBS Unstoppable on YouTube? How will you know when new videos drop? You better go subscribe before you miss a crazy STEM moment, like me walking a shark or making a black hole in my backyard.